baptism. Is that better? No? There. Did I mess it up here? Not yet, eh?
Closer to the mic.
Well, to tell you the truth, I seldom ever think of my baptism. Maybe at the Easter Vigil, when we are invited to proclaim the creed in question and answer form. And then I read Pope Francis' autobiography, Hope, where he writes about his baptismal day. He says, "It's a day that roots us. It gives us the shoots of our earthly life and our eternal life. It's the day on which we are born forever. We must remember that day because it is a flame that has been enkindled and needs to be kept aflight. Baptism is a gift. No one has earned it. It is a gift that makes us belong to God. It tells us we are not left alone to stumble in the darkness of history. It immerses us in history. It immerses us with God's people. And it makes us look at life as God looks at life. God who always sees in us an irrepressible kernel of beauty. The last word of history, of humanity, is not evil, is not war, is not death. Baptism tells us all this. It is the first encounter with Jesus, not with a figure from the past, but with a person living today, with whom we don't get to know in the history books, but we encounter in life. And if we want to give ourselves a gift, let us begin by recalling that day and by celebrating it as it deserves." End quote. I thought it was a good one. But being a cradle Catholic who was baptized shortly after birth and thus incorporated into the Christian community called church, I remember nothing, even though I was there. However, when I worked with the RCIA process in the early 80s in Brant Deanery, I was blown away with the reaction of the candidates at the Easter Vigil. They were ecstatic. I saw such respect, such appreciation, such joy as they were received into the church through baptism or reception at the Easter Vigil, and as I listened to their testimonies through the mystagogy period. For baptism initiates us not only into the Christian community, but the very life of Jesus Christ. You know, it's amazing when you think of it. And the newly baptized made me think of it. A mystery into which I delved deeper and deeper as I reflected, prayed, studied, made retreats, etc. So, how have I lived my baptism? I guess it's by asking me how did I live my life. For it is only in life that we encounter Jesus, God, the Spirit. I was born and grew up in a practicing Catholic family. My father was quite religious, my mother perhaps less so. She told us she learned more about the faith taking our question and answer catechism homework. Although over the years, I'd say her faith grew in a very deep way. When we were young, my dad bought us 2 little books on the lives of the saints. One about the female saints and one about the male saints. And I read them over and over, especially the female saints. I decided I wanted to be one. My father was well read in the theology and spirituality of the day, and he was not above being critical of the church, especially in its pastors and their practices and their sermons. So I grew up listening at times, especially over Sunday brunch, with neighbors or family members dropping in, their voiced praise or frustrations over a church matter. Although I didn't take part in these sometimes heated discussions, I had a sense that God was taking delight in his people, for they seemed to be passionately caring about his church. To give you an example, my dad was a weekend dad. He worked away from home all week, so family time was very precious to him. For him, children belonged with their families at Sunday Mass. Well, one Sunday, the pastor said that the 10 o'clock Mass from now on would be the children's Mass, with the children sitting in a body away from their parents. My father was dead against it. He was so angry that my mother went to an early Mass with my brother, who was serving as an altar boy, in order to avoid the conflicting situation that she could envision happening as we entered the church. So my young sister and I entered the church, and Monsignor said, "Good morning, Ed. The children go up the middle aisle, and you may sit on the side." I held my breath, waiting for the fireworks. But my father said nothing, and released our hands as we walked to our respective places. Later, my dad must have had an appointment with Monsignor, for there never was a Sunday's children's Mass ever again. My father had a Jesuit cousin who was like another brother to him. Father Tom would visit very often, and he and Dad would hold deep conversations about religion and politics long into the wee hours of the morning. And as you can remember, Father Peyton, well, some of you can remember, he used to say, "The family that prays together stays together." Oh, you're same vintage. So early October, month of the Holy Rosary, and May, traditionally Our Lady's Month, we did the Family Rosary Blitz, which often consisted of Hail Mary, Tom kneel up straight, the Lord is with you. Mary Elizabeth, leave the dog alone. That's the Rosary. Attending a Catholic school certainly nourished my faith, particularly in high school, where many of us girls joined the Synodality of Our Lady. Within that milieu, I seemed to develop a great devotion to Mary, who was like a constant companion to me. The motto of the Synodality is Ad Jesum per Mariam, to Jesus through Mary. And that's exactly what Mary did. She took me to her son Jesus, with whom I fell in love. Now that might sound corny, but it's true. Throughout grade school, I felt a call to religious life. You know, remember the saint bit? But during high school and beyond, I fought that call with great gusto. I had a wonderful and lively, sometimes too lively, high school social life. However, after attending Peterborough Teachers College and 2 wonderful years of teaching, I lost the battle with my vocation, surrendered to the call, and entered the Sisters of Providence of St. Vincent de Paul in Kingston in 1959. And the rest, you might say, is history. Only it isn't. I thought I would teach school and be part of a parish for the rest of my life, until it was time to be put out to pasture at the mother house to end my days. However, I only taught 7 wonderful years, mostly grade 8 in elementary school, and later 6 years in high school. As a young sister, I was chosen to attend Divine Word, a catechetical school established by Cardinal Carter in London in response to Vatican II. This was an exciting time to be part of the church. Vatican II, through the courageous leadership of my hero, Pope John XXIII, opened the windows of our fortress Catholic Church to let in fresh air of the Holy Spirit and the modern world and the ecumenical movement. For me and many others, it was invigorating. Our spirits were ready for it. For others, it was definitely not invigorating. It was disturbing, even scary. For them, especially in the liturgy, things were happening too fast, and there was great polarization, especially in my own religious congregation. The church was asked to read the signs of the times in light of the gospel. Religious were asked to return to their roots in order to discover the raison d'etre and the spirit of their founders. We discovered that we were an apostolic ministerial congregation, not a monastic one. We were meant to be serving out among the people. In fact, our patron, St. Vincent de Paul, with an attitude of being wise as a serpent and simple as a dove, prophetically insisted that his sisters would not become cloistered monastic congregations and lose their work with the poor, as his friend St. Francis de Sales had done when he instituted the Visitation Sisters, which certainly suggests visiting. But this cloister was slapped upon them, and they're still cloistered sisters today. Vincent insisted the daughters would not be called nuns, but sisters, would not take solemn vows, but yearly promises of poverty, chastity, and obedience. The streets of the poor and the hospital wards would be their cloister, their cell a hired room, holy modesty their veil, and the parish church their chapel. Many of us were so excited about this discovery, we asked to leave teaching and hospital administration to take up ministries with the poor. With 3 other sisters, I opened a group home for girls from the courts, runners, a drug queen, etc. At the same time, I was working in 25 schools as a religious ed consultant, introducing the new catechetical experiential program, Come to the Father. Talk about burning the candle at both ends. But that catechetical work, with its ongoing formation, was a wonderful experience for me. I seemed to go deeper and deeper in the knowledge of God and Jesus and their great unconditional love for me. But some parents, teachers, and priests wanted to return to the old Baltimore Catechism with the right answers. So, polarization in community, polarization in ministry. Thus, living and working with disturbed girls, though difficult at times naturally, was a godsend in comparison. We formed a great little community, and perhaps I was relating them more and to their problems with a greater understanding. Later, I was asked to begin university campus ministry at Queen's Newman House, again a ministry we had never done before. With another sister and priest, we formed a co-ed Christian community, living in 3 different houses, a wonderful and rich experience. Then I was called to set up campus ministry program at St. John's College in Brantford. At the same time, while serving on the vocation committee, we held wonderful retreats for wonderful young women showing an interest in religious life. Some entered, but few stayed. What was God saying to us? Was there another way? I forget who it was that said the first millennium was the millennium of the clergy, the second millennium of the religious, and third of the laity. So, if this is so, what about starting a lay associate process for those who feel called to our spirit? So we sent a proposal to chapter, which was accepted, and I was taken out of full-time high school ministry to begin what is now known as Providence Associates. Women and men who feel called to share in the cares and spirituality and mission of the Sisters of Providence of St. Vincent de Paul without full membership. And I know many of you are associates of different congregations here. It wasn't long before we had more associates than sisters. And last month we just celebrated their 40th anniversary. After a wonderful sabbatical, I asked if I might use my gifts for parish ministry. So at Christmas time, I made an appointment with the bishop about the possibility. He asked me to return when my sabbatical was complete in the spring, so I did. I was surprised he had a country parish all lined up. I was delighted, and the priest who would say Mass on Sunday was a good friend of mine, and we had worked well together in catechetics. Drop down duty, heavens from above. Then he opened the big ledger and discussed salary, benefits, etc. I said, Bishop, just before we sign anything, I'd like to let you know my stance on 3 things. Not that I'd ever preach about them in any way, but I want you to know my stance. They were birth control, to which he gave me a lecture on the natural law, homosexuality, which I don't recall any serious dispute, and the third was the ordination of women needs to be seriously explored, to which he answered, no, sister, that is a dogma of faith. To which I replied, Your Grace, I beg to differ. It's tradition. The big book was closed, and the interview was over. My priest friend said, why did you say that? I said I wanted to be upfront. But you know, most of them feel as I do and don't say it. How can we as a church have a people of integrity with such silence? As Timothy Ratcliffe, now Cardinal Timothy, said at the Synod, we do not have a right to keep silent. And that's how I got into justice ministry, into which I was baptized by fire in a military town. We were celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Horse Artillery with a parade, keys to the city, and war games for the children in the park. This is my first week in the office. 3 of us spoke to City Council regarding the latter, which would really glamorize war to the children. I said, even I'd like to get up in a tank and everything. Of course, that part was quoted in the paper. But anyway, all hell broke loose. For 3 weeks running, letters to the editor criticized us. Only 3 agreed with our stance. And one was the doctor of nuclear disarmament who did the presentation with us. So the message was muddled. We were not against the veterans. We were against war games for children that glamorized war. So through this new ministry, I learned that in the 70s at a synod of bishops, it was declared that justice is as constitutive to the gospel as charity. And even before, Pope John said, justice comes before charity. In his encyclical Pacem in Terris, he stated, charity will never be true charity unless it takes justice into account. Let no one with small gifts of charity exempt themselves from the great duties imposed by justice. As Pope Paul VI said at the end, no justice, no peace. The greatest learning for me when I went into the Justice and Peace Office, now the JPIC office, was that poverty is political. It is not by chance that most people are poor. It is mostly because of unjust systemic policies. Why, even people on social assistance are kept in poverty with all the restrictions that are attached to their checks. So, I became political, not partisan, political, and networked with other groups against systemic injustice and for change. In the beginning, I took a lot of flack for my stance, both from inside my community and outside. For 20 years, we with a group of committed Kingstonians held a silent Friday noon hour vigil, claiming public space in front of City Hall, keeping before our eyes and others the plight of the poor and the injustice towards our common home. Surprisingly, after justice ministry, I was elected to leadership in my community, and there I served for 8 wonderful years. It was a great privilege with wonderful opportunities. But you know, we nuns don't retire. We just get recycled. I'm still active in JPIC and interfaith coalitions. I serve on the board of St. Vincent de Paul and an international governing board of Women of Providence and Collaboration. I'm still called upon occasionally to give talks and retreats. Sister Jeanette and I do a series of ongoing education for our sisters and associates. I've been the guest homilist in almost all the mainstream Christian churches in Kingston over the years, except the Catholic Church. So I guess that's how I live out my baptism. Certainly not perfectly. My limitations and selfish sinfulness get in the way. But I live life to the full, most wholeheartedly, and with great joy, with my beloved by my side. Now I realize, in spite of all its warts and growing pains, and from time to time my deep frustration and holy anger with the church, in my heart, I know it's my home, and it's full of mystics and prophets, past and present. Often we have no idea how God's providence is at work in our lives. It is gently, silently at work, even when things go wrong. For me as a sister of Providence, God's providence is that gentle name of God that holds with care the evolutionary movements of life in creative tension, seeking resolution at a higher or deeper plane by creating a new way of seeing and acting that reconciles the differences by transcending them towards a good outcome of meaning and eventually harmony. You know, I've often wondered, what did Jesus really mean when he said to the Samaritan woman at the well, "Believe me, woman, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. The time is coming, indeed it is already here, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth." I long for that day when, as Revelation says, all things will be made new.